Good evening, everyone. My name is Ella Sheba O'Day. Today, we've gathered as sharing the scope. We're going to keep this introduction a little short today just because we have a lot of information to take in. But thank you so much for keeping your cameras on during the session. And we're going to start with an introduction that David will share.
Hi guys, my name is David. I'm going to be introducing our panelists today. First, we have Dr. Donovan Damer. He is an MD candidate at the University of South Alabama College of Medicine. He recently matched into ophthalmology at the University of Iowa. And then we also have three more panelists. Dr. Matt Saperstein, an MD candidate at Michigan State University College of Osteopathic Medicine. He matched at Cook County Health. Dr. Pam Kapayan is a MD candidate at Weill Cornell Medicine, and she matched at the Baylor College of Medicine. And Dr. Alex Gordon is a MD candidate at the University of Miami Miller School of Medicine. He matched at St. John's Episcopal Hospital.
And Donovan, would you mind going, I think, 2 slides backwards, please?
Oh, 2 slides backwards?
Yes. Usually,
yeah, I just have my slides.
Okay. Usually
Yeah.
our agenda kind of follows the same sort of timeline, but today we'll be starting with the presentation, then we'll do an audience question and answer session, and then we will move on to the prepared question. So we're going to start with Donovan giving us the presentation titled Navigating the Application Process in Ophthalmology.
All right, guys. Well, welcome. I'm so excited to have everyone here. Hopefully this presentation is relatable to you. I think it will be. I think all of it will be. I would like to, well, I guess I can't know if who's M1s, who's M2s, and M3s, etc. But hopefully we have a good mixture of all 3 classes, and this will be relatable to everyone. So let's get started. So originally this was created by 2 other medical students at my medical school, but then I took it over and I did a lot of updating, and I think it's pretty solid. So we'll get started. Okay, so here's the outline. So we're gonna go over M1, M2 years, M3 year, application timeline, away rotation, SF match, just the components of it, and then interviews, and then some closing remarks. So that's kind of the, so it's pretty comprehensive. May not have everything, but it should have a lot of information for you. So M1, M2 years. So during these years, you know, there's not a whole bunch you should really be focusing on, because you really should be focusing on passing your modules, you know, doing well in classes. But I do recommend, you know, when you have some time, because that's going to look really good in interviews when they say, hey, you know, did you shadow or on your application? And you also have to know, you know, if you want to do this career, you know, it may look good on paper, but it may seem different in clinic. So make sure you shadow when you can. Holidays, independent study days, and one summer, all great. Make sure you chat with ophthalmologists. Ophthalmology is not the biggest field in the world. It's actually a pretty small field, so networking can be really vital. I mean, it won't make or break you, but having connections can really make a difference. It made a difference for me, and I'm sure many other applicants. Step 1, so it's not as, you know, daunting as it used to be now that it's pass fail, but make sure you pass on the first time. You know, you're capable of doing that. And yeah, just study hard for it. Don't be super nervous. It's really just a stepping stone. So it's not something to be too concerned about, but make sure you pass it. Summer research between M1 and M2 year. This is something I didn't get to do because I decided on ophthalmology 3rd year medical school. But if you're an M1 and you know now this is the field for you, doing some summer research and an ophthalmology specific program, research program would be very beneficial. So places like UAB have, they have one, and maybe I think a couple other places. So yeah, that's something to look into. But just doing research in general, doesn't have to be ophthalmology, can, you know, obviously improve your CV. So just try to do some research in that year if you're able to, that summer. And then overall, I would say just focus on being a well-rounded student, do well in your modules, you know, find leadership opportunities you're passionate about. You know, just don't do stuff just to do it. Like when you're in your interview and you talk about things you've done over the past few years, you know, they're going to see your passion for it, you know, and that's going to really excite them. And that's gonna be like, oh, so you really enjoyed that. So do things you love, shadow, volunteer, And obviously, do well in your modules because you just got to have the grades just because that's like a foot in the door. But you don't have to have all honors. Just make sure you pass. All right, M3 year. So we're kind of progressing on now. So during this time, honestly, focus on, again, learning medicine, passing every shelf. Again, you don't have to do, get honors every time, but it's always nice to aim for it. Make sure you balance wellness though. M3 year is a tough year, because you're balancing, studying and also being in the hospital. So make sure you take care of yourself. And then, you won't get a ton of ophthalmology exposure. At least I didn't, coming from a place without a home program. If you do have a program, it's great because I think you get like a month or two, maybe. That's always amazing. But if you don't have a home program, it's always good to try to get some shadowing in, like I said, in those breaks, just to kind of continue to learn ophthalmology and get ready for OAs. But make sure this is what you want to do. I kept an open mind pretty much throughout the entire process until I would say middle of third year. So, if this is something you've always wanted to do, then go for it. But if you're still kind of like, well, I like ophthalmology, but there could be other things, take some time to explore, because that just makes your decision that much more confident, because you're like, okay, I explored and this is what I really want to do. The past medical students, they had open houses here. I don't remember any open houses M3 year. Maybe my co-panelists, maybe they went to some. I really went to open houses during my fourth year, which I'll talk more about that. But if any are available, attend, because they can increase your chances of interviewing, which I didn't know that till later in the game. But yeah, when they told me that, I was like, oh, I had no idea. But it makes sense because programs, there's so many applicants, they want to see interest. Are you interested in this? Did you come to our open house? And that may, emphasis on may, increase your chances of getting an interview. So something very important. And then in that spring semester of M3 year, I would begin collecting paperwork for OAs, because it takes a lot. Some OAs require more documentation than others. But definitely start to get on that early so you're ready for it. Also applications, and also begin brainstorming your personal statement. My recommendation is create a story that draws the readers in and shows your personality and who you desire to be or who you are as a person, or et cetera. Basically, just tell your story. Create a story, let it make sense, and let the story be relatable to your CV. Like, you should be able to look at your CV and look at your personal statement and be like, oh, okay, it all matches up. It's not like two different people, but your personal statement can also be something completely different that's unrelated to your CV as well. So you just got to kind of have to play around with it. But that was the advice that I got, if that makes sense. But just overall, just show your personality and just be genuine. That's the biggest thing. And then pay attention when you're in the OR. Make sure you know how patients are set up and moved and everything. That's a pretty big thing, because you can always help out on your ways. And then I would say always try to aim above average when you're taking standardized exams, but at least average or above average will get you at least looked at. Obviously, the higher the better. You don't have to be 280s, 270s. But obviously just above average can really is really what you want to try to shoot for. But if you're average, you're not necessarily out of the game. I never like to tell someone like, oh, you didn't score this, you're out of it, because not everything I did was above average. I had some average things in there and I still matched. But obviously you want a couple of things to be, do well, because that can, help you stand out, especially when they're kind of, trying to weed out certain people. So yeah. And then, start thinking about letters of rec early. Need at least one academic ophthalmologist. Make sure you give them plenty of time. I had one ophthalmology, one internal medicine, and one general surgery. I felt like that was a good trio, because it's, obviously ophthalmology in there, but then also the thinking with the internal medicine, then the hand-eye coordination with the surgery. I felt like that was a good trio, but some people, everyone was a little different. Some people had 2 ophthalmology. Some people had more family medicine, stuff like that. So, but at least one academic ophthalmology. And then work on your CV. If you're an M1, M2, be working on that now. If you're an M3, definitely make sure it's updated. Revita, that's my Dean of Student Affairs. Just check with your Dean of Student Affairs and see if they can help you out, if they have any examples, because that was really beneficial. So application time. So M4 year. So M4 year is really where everything gets intense, So this is where the bulk of the presentation really is. So, okay. So obviously ophthalmology is match early. If you didn't know that, now you know, because everything's going to come quick. So since we're match early, start early and submit early. So basically, the way the timeline is set up, it kind of varies from year to year. But this year, July 1st was the day where the application portal opened up. Now, to be honest, I didn't really look at the application until after step 2. So I didn't start my application until August, but I had already been working on my personal statement and my letters of rec. Those things that take time, I'd already worked on those, but the little stuff like what kind of activities you did, all that stuff, I kind of put that on the back burner till step 2 was over with. Altis, that's another big thing. Make sure you sign up for that as soon as you're able to, so you can get a good spot and you're not having to scramble towards the end. That's kind of like the personality character exam thing that residencies might have used or might not, we don't really know, but just, study for it, make sure you do well. It always looks good if you can do well in something. And then September 1st, that is the big day where all the residencies can look at, what applications have been submitted. You want your application in there. You want to submit it like August 29th, to be honest, just to make sure it all goes through, because you want your application to be in the first batch of all the applications they see. So September 1st should be, your application should be submitted by then. Honestly, the 29th or 30th or whatever. And then after that, it's pretty much just a waiting game. You wait for interview invitations, then interviews begin on 31st, and then they conclude on the 23rd. And then it's just rank lists and so on and so on. Really, this top line, you want to make sure your stuff is in there. So this is really for people without a home program. I personally submitted to every residency in the nation. So I think I had 119 applications sent out. That's because your boy wasn't trying to do a research year. I was like, all chips in, I'm going for this. I'm not about to repeat. So some people didn't take that approach. Some applied to 50, 60, 70, 80, whatever, but for me, without a home program, I knew I really had to put myself out there, and, it worked out. So it just kind of depends on your situation, especially financially as well. But yeah, my advice is just apply broadly, because it just gives you the best opportunity. So then deadlines, like I said, they can change from year to year. So make sure you just take a look at, the Academy's website or SF Match website, and make sure you get the proper deadlines. And then I recommend during your M3 December break, make a plan of, when are you going to apply to your ways, do your applications, do your personal statement, all that different stuff, just so, you're on top of everything, because it will come fast and you'll be like, man, I need to do this, do that. And you're still trying to do clerkships and you're still trying to study for step 2. So be organized, make a plan, because that will make your life a lot easier when things start to get busy. And then, yeah, some deadlines are specific to each program, but that September 1st, that's just when everyone can look. Some programs do have, where they say like, oh, we're not gonna look at applications till maybe September 15th. But like I said, get it in August so you don't have to worry about it. And that's pretty much that. So away rotations, man, boy, I loved my away rotations. They were the best, very fond memories. So this is just kind of like a sample M4 schedule. Obviously, this was specific to my school, but every school is going to be different. But the way I set up my M4 schedule is, I took a step 2 course that my school offered in July. And then I did a rotation at a private ophthalmologist just to kind of prep me for my aways. I already had a letter of rec, so I didn't have to do an away early. But if you don't have a letter of rec, you may want to consider doing a rotation in one of these earlier spots so you can get a letter of rec. And this is for people without a home program. If you have a home program, your life is like so much easier. But if you don't, you gotta hustle a little harder, but there's nothing wrong with that. And then the way that I set it up next is that I had all my aways like back to back to back. Then I had vacation for interviews, and then I had my AI where I did my ICU, which was so nice. I got out at noon every day. That was a good month. So let me give you some tips for aways, because I really think, this is the kind of the beginning of the tips. But if you don't have a home program, we recommend you do as many as possible and start saving money now, because it can be pretty expensive. Where you do your aways may affect your interviews. I got an interview at UT San Antonio just for being an away student. It was great. I also loved it. I would definitely work at UT San Antonio if I had the opportunity, but not all do. So don't just think, oh, just because I'm a away student, I'm getting an interview. Not always the case, but some do. So it's a nice perk. Yeah, the maximum amount you can do is 3 aways. Like I said, with the first one being a place where you can get a letter of rec if you need one. And then, yeah, then open houses. Like I said, programs are looking for interest. So if you go to an open house, that may increase your chance of getting an interview. It may not. So, you just kind of decide whether you want to take the time to go to one or not. And then, yeah, in past cycles, they did allow for private ophthalmologists to write a letter of rec. I think they like it academic now that COVID's kind of passing on, depending on who you ask. So yeah, so I would just try to get academic, and I would just if you're going to get private, make sure you talk to someone. And maybe my other co-panelists, they know for sure if it's academic or private, but I think it's academic now. But yeah. So okay, this is huge. So this was my secret sauce for Aways right here, man. I'm telling you. So simplest course, that was a course at my school, obviously. But if you can try to do a ophthalmology specific rotation before your Aways, it really helps you get just acquainted with the field, getting into how to use a slit lamp, how to do indirect if you're able to learn, and just the overall basic terminology and everything. So I recommend when you do that, you treat it like a boot camp, and you review iGuru, Tim Root, Basic Ophthalmology by the Academy. You don't have to do all of those, but at least maybe 1 or 2 of those. There's also some additional resources there. And then, so work with Nita. So Nita is an OT, or she's a tech trainer, right? She basically trains all the techs and gets them ready to work with the ophthalmologist. Obviously, not everyone may have a Nita, but if you can find a tech trainer, man, working with them, they really walk you through all kinds of stuff and really get you prepared for your Aways. She taught me a lot about how to tech up patients, because they'll ask you on your Aways, especially on consult service, they'll ask you hey, go take these vitals. And that's visual acuity, pressure, pupil. And if you know how to do that, you look like a rock star. If you don't, they'll teach you and you'll be able to do it, then. But yeah, coming in with some knowledge about ophthalmology in your Aways, it's always good. If you don't have it, you'll learn quickly and you'll do fine. As far as applying to Aways, I was told to at least double the amount you desire to do. So if you want to do 3 Aways, apply to 6. Keep in mind though, there's some risks to that, because you may have to decline Aways. And if you decline in a way, then they may not offer you an interview. I actually had to decline Iowa because they told me so late, and I still matched there. So it's not all, that may not be true in all cases, but just be aware and make sure you have a good excuse if you do have to decline. But I was told to apply to 2 safe schools, 2 schools outside of your region if you're interested, and then 2 top 10, top 20 schools. So yeah, I felt like that was pretty good advice. And yeah, make sure you start early, because VisLo requires a lot, and look for scholarships, especially if you're a minority. I was able to get a couple. It helped out a ton. And yeah, it was a big benefit. All right, so here's the thing. I feel like now okay, this is kind of like a very generalized statement. Maybe not everyone's Aways were easy. Maybe just the ones that I went to, they were a little lighter. But I felt like they were pretty straightforward, because I did these select things right here. Be on time. If you're on time, you're already winning the game. Have a great attitude. That goes a long, long way. Be friendly always to everyone. You should really be doing this all the time. We should all be kind to each other. But if you want to put on a face, be friendly. Be eager to learn. Yeah, don't be too eager, because you don't want to annoy the residents. There's a nice little balance. Don't try to outshine interns or PGY2s. Man, do not do this. The interns, they're kind of away from ophthalmology. PGY2s maybe for a little bit as well while they're, in medicine. So, you pick up stuff quick. And if you're doing it for 3 months, day after day after day, you learn a lot of stuff. So, if you get asked a question and they miss it, and then, they pimp down, which you really shouldn't pimp down, you should always pimp up. You get to decide, do I want to get this question right? Or do I want to miss it? But I was just told by an attending, hey, don't outshine interns or PGYs. Stay in your lane. You're an M4 student rotating. Just act like it, Attend any opportunities given, any lectures, wet labs, go for it. Within reason. And guys, it's so subjective. I know it's annoying, but it's just so subjective. Some places love it when you take calls. Some places hate it. So just use your social skills. ask a resident that you've become friends with, like, hey, like, should I take call? Do you guys like that, or do you not like that? They'll tell you. Most places I never took call because they were like, oh no, you don't really have to. Some places they probably love it, but not the places that I rotated at. And don't be a gunner. Like, come on now, like, work hard, be genuine, but don't try to be a gunner and like throw people on the bus and stuff like that. Like, be a good person, have fun, finally in a specialty you like. Again, just be a normal person. If they like you, they like you. If they don't, they don't. Don't stress out, be someone you're not. Just be a normal person, go in there, be friendly, do well, work hard, you'll be fine. And yeah, don't be standoffish. Try to make friends with the other away students. And yeah, start your assignments early. Don't have to do anything. This is the playoffs. Like, you want to be on top of everything when you're at an away. If they say, hey, we want you to present at the end of your rotation, start that presentation early, perfect it, have people look at it, and you'll do fine. Enjoy the city. I didn't expect for weekends to be off, but they were. Man, that was like the best thing ever. So I really enjoyed the city. Be eager to see patients. I know it may be nerve-wracking, but you got to have a growth mindset. Like, you can only get better if you see patients. Pick one thing to get better at and just do that over and over again. When you see patients, maybe for like a week, and you'll get better at it. So yeah, be eager to see patients, because that does go a long way. And yeah, aim to present to residents, fellows, make a template to stay organized if you need to. That can also go a long way. So that's a ways. Those are some tips from Lex and Stewart as well. They pretty much go over what I went over. But yeah, I love the ways. They're great. I recommend them to anyone who wants to do them. And this is just unrelated to you guys, just South Alabama stuff. But it does take home the point of connections are everything. Utilize your alumni. If you're genuinely interested, they will help you. Just show them that you have a great work ethic, and they'll really go to bat for you, definitely. But if you don't have any connections, you can still match. I still feel like I would have matched at certain places without the connections, but connections always help. They always help. And then SF match. So this is just like components of it. As you can see, there's a lot. So make sure you just have everything together, and make sure you're able to, do it in a time that works for you. But it wasn't all too bad. Things that make you stand out. And this is just my opinion. So this is all my opinion. But things that make you stand out. Leadership positions. You don't need 50 of them, but 2 to 3 solid ones help you stand out. Having meaningful patient interactions. Ask about your interviews. Tell me about a meaningful patient interaction that was positive or negative, whatever. So make sure you have a couple in your mind to go through. Meaningful service projects, always great. Be able to talk about your research. And if you can get some publications, that always helps. Obviously, AOA and Gold Humanism shows that you're smart and compassionate. That always helps, but it's not a deal breaker. Have fun hobbies. Man, I played pickleball a couple times. I talked about that in my interview, and they loved it. They ate it up. Like, they're like, oh, pickleball, yeah. So yeah, have some interesting hobbies, because it helps. Be personable, be kind, all that stuff. Have somewhat of an intriguing life outside of medicine if you can. If you can be an intriguing person, that can go a long way. Job history. Oh my word. Some places like, oh, you worked in the restaurant business. Oh, you were in landscaping. Like, that's so cool. So if you got some good jobs in the past, that always helped. Be My Eyes volunteer. That's like an app on the phone. A lot of people asked about that. Mom program or some sort of diversity program, that I felt like that was beneficial. And then just having strong character and moral convictions. I'm a God-fearing man, so that was kind of like, that's a big thing in my life. But just having good character is just really important. And they can really tell in your interviews if you're a person of good character. So be working on your character. I mean, we all should be, though. And then interview. All right, so make sure you're organized. The SF match, they actually have an interview sheet where like it kind of tells you what interviews you have and like what you can't get. So they make it very easy. You don't have to have like a whole Excel sheet unless you just want that. But yes, it's called FS Match Scheduling, and they will automatically show you which dates you have available when you get a new interview in. So that was very, very beneficial. Have a team. My parents, because I was on my aways, my parents helped me accept interviews. So having a couple people, in your corner to help to have access to your, email account and be able to answer different things, very, very beneficial. Right now, the max amount is 15. So if you go past 15, you have to reject someone that you accepted recently, or reject the new one. So keep that in mind if you get above 15. And yeah, that's pretty much that. And then some tips. So do mock interviews, always helpful. Practice basic questions. Answer the questions unless they break the rules. They're not allowed to ask you, oh, what's your rank list, or oh, what are the other interviews? They can't do that. Normally, most won't though. Be yourself. I've said that multiple times. Be able to talk about research. That's one of the toughest things. Practice that, a lot. And then, yeah, they said, I know the other medical, they said schedule an interview at a place you may not want to go first, if possible, because you get to practice. Yeah, have 2 suits. Well, actually, I don't know. I did have 2 suits, but I had one that was more favored than the other. So I just wore that one a lot. And then thank you letters and emails. I didn't send any. Maybe other people did. I was told in my very first interview, like, hey, we don't need them. So that was the vibe for the whole time. I was like, hey, like, if I got to send you thank you letter just to get in, like, man, that's a lot. But some people may disagree. But for the most part, I hear they don't really. They get so many, they just don't really look at them. But I guess it just depends on who you ask. But the email of interest, I did do that. And that is sending an email of interest to a school after you've sent them an application before interview invitations. In that little period of time, you say, hey, interested in your school, et cetera, et cetera. So, get that help? Maybe not. So yeah, but just a little tip. So yeah, interview questions. So I have a folder on my computer with all these interview questions. Not that I specifically got, but I got from my diversity program, MOM program, and I gave them to my students at my school. So if you guys are interested in them as well, I felt like they were pretty beneficial. And then this folder also has some tips on interview questions, and then it also has some ophthalmology residency match questions and some other things. So maybe I can send that to Sheba, and then she could send it out to anyone who's interested. Or maybe that may be too complicated, but I'm sure your school will also have some stuff like that. But here's some examples of questions that you may get. Man, tell me about a time in your life when you failed or struggled. I just did not like that question. I get what they're trying to do or say, but it was just tough. And then, okay, yeah, I guess I'm running low on time. And then, yeah, build rapport. That's a big thing, what you should ask. And then what I looked for is I really look for good surgical numbers, good people, did they have a VA, location, all that stuff. And then closing remarks. I would say the biggest thing is don't compare yourself to someone else. You're your own person, just do well, work hard, and understand that, you're capable. And yeah, network when you can. Consider a plan B if you need to, but definitely go hard. And then this is a good little guide for other stuff that you may have questions on. Other places also have good ophthalmology examples as well, but obviously I'm biased to Iowa. And then here's some stats as well, which I don't really care about stats too much. And then that's my email. So you can also email me for anything. So yeah, hopefully that was beneficial for you guys, and I will stop sharing. Yeah, there we go.
That was great, Donovan. Speaking of passion, you just presented with so much passion. So thank you for your energy and such great information. At this time, we'll take questions that are specific to the presentation, and we'll have more time for other questions later. But if you have any questions specific to the presentation, you can unmute or just write in the chat, and then Temi's going to monitor the chat and read the questions aloud.
Hey, I want to stop sharing. It just says pause share. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. There we go.
Any questions specific to the presentation? I know folks were asking their questions in the chat as you were presenting. So thank you to the other panelists for answering those questions for us.
Yeah, hopefully I didn't say anything too crazy.
Does anybody have any I know there's a lot of information, but any fears on they don't feel like they can do something, or they feel as if something's not realistic, or they're so confused on a certain part of the presentation? Maybe we can clear up.
I have one just because Donovan, thank you so much for your presentation. It was really, really good. And it's really great to see kind of all the guidance there. So my question was, I know you mentioned that you didn't like the question, and I don't want to make you rehash something you don't like a lot, but it was how did you respond when you were asked about a time in your life when you failed or struggled? How did you approach that?
Yeah, man. No, and no worries. I was just really kind of joking. But yeah, I took it as so I answered it honestly. This is a time when I felt like I did fail. However, I always put that positive spin on. But your boy bounced back. I did what I need to do to get better at whatever I failed out. And then I just kind of continued on and just kind of tried to show them my resiliency. That's probably the biggest thing, resiliency and perseverance. That was kind of like the theme I wanted to give them with at the end of that answer is like, hey, yeah, I messed up, I struggled, but I persevered, I was resilient, and it worked out.
I have some questions in the chat. First one, do you recommend creating a med Twitter account for networking?
Yeah, I was actually typing something up for this. I'd say you can do it if you're committed to actually building your following. Like if you make a med Twitter and you have like 30 followers, like no one's gonna like see your account or like notice it really. So you have to like kind of be committed to building up your following, tweeting often, off those specific things that like certain presentations you're doing or certain activities that will look good to maybe anyone who might have some type of power in the nebula of or the the cloud of Twitter for the application season. So I would say if you're going to be committed to it, do it. If not, it really could be a waste of time.
And the second question, do you have any tips on how to approach for asking for letters of recommendation and who to ask? I feel like people always make it seem like you have to ask people who have known you since the second you were born.
I can go ahead and answer that one. So when it comes to letter of recommendations, yeah, you want someone who knows you very well, yada, yada, but you also want someone who can speak on your work. And so one of the things that I would recommend is that when I started working with someone like in my department on a research project, after maybe like a couple of months or so, and this was like a year and a half before even applying, I told them, I was like, I'd really love to have you as a letter writer, and I would love to continue working with you, because off the bat, like they already know, okay, like let me pay attention to all the things a student is doing. They really want me to contribute to their application. And I found that to be very helpful. But also when you go through clerkships, I came in with the idea of like, oh, I'm gonna get someone in like surgery. And then I didn't end up getting someone in surgery because of the personalities were just like different. But then surprisingly, there was a attending who really liked me in medicine. And I was like, oh, she's the one. And so kind of just getting the vibes for who is like feeling you, and then don't like just ask them for it. Just even if the application is a year away, just ask them and have written that, like if you want, you can request like some of like the evaluation that they may write for you. So that way you could keep it in the future for when that time comes, you can send it back to them and they can write your letter.
I have another question, but I'll let Matthew go ahead and ask his question.
Thank you. So my question is really just more from, I guess, the practicality side of things in terms of navigating like the SF match, and it is in regard to letters of recommendation. So my question is, you said that you had uploaded general surgery and ophthalmology and I believe an internal medicine letter. And I'm aware that in terms of the number that you can send to a program, 3 letters is like the cap. But are you able to alter which 3 letters go to which programs, or is it you upload 3 letters to SF Match and those are the ones that go to every program?
Let's see. I just did the send 3 to all programs. I feel like maybe someone said you can send a specific letter to certain programs. Any of the co-panelists can weigh in on that one?
Yeah, you can actually tailor it to where you want the or to go. So you can be specific on, so say for example, like you have a couple schools you want to send specific letters to, you can kind of switch it out and put, substitute those specific letters for those two places. And then for all the other institutions you're sending them for, you can send their original three. So you can do that.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
Alia?
Yeah, I just had a really good question regarding networking. It was brought up previously that don't commit to med Twitter unless, sorry, don't use med Twitter unless you're going to commit to it. So for students who maybe not, they realize that they're not going to be using med Twitter, is Instagram or LinkedIn or just, conventional text messages or email a fruitful way of staying in touch with individuals that you've met or you've networked with in the past? Or what would you suggest for like the M2s, M3s, prior to them really, getting to that point where they're definitely going to be submitting their application? And even when we are submitting our application, should we like reach out to the people that we know at the institution and just say like, hey, just so you know, I've also submitted an application. So yeah, that was a loaded question. But if you could kindly address some of those points, or if there's anything you want me to clarify, please let me know.
No, I think you hit the nail on the head. For me, as a DO student with no home program, I networked a lot, and networking didn't mean always, going to conferences or like networking with attendings. Like it was like residents. So whether it was through LinkedIn, I hit people up on Facebook, not a ton on Instagram, but like just saying, hey, you reach out, hey, I'm a second-year med student interested in ophthalmology. I'm wondering, this is the message I sent, for example. I'm wondering if you'd be willing to chat over Zoom for 20 minutes, just to answer a few questions, at your convenience. No worries if not. Like I never put the pressure on them, but I loved getting the FaceTime of like, we're on a camera like this, they would remember me and I would remember them. And that was huge for me.
Yeah, in terms of like Instagram or like LinkedIn, I mean, Instagram is kind of like, I feel like I see similarities between Instagram and Twitter. It's just the different medium of like posting pictures and captions. It's kind of like similar thing. You're still following and other people following you, posting stories. So it's kind of like, again, if that, you got to be kind of committed to it. But if you want to just stay in contact with people that you've met, to be honest, you can just send emails like periodically, like, hey, like, just checking in. This is what I've been doing lately. I hope everything is well. And then if they're at a certain institution that you're interested in, maybe ask a pertinent question. And then, their program, whether it's the type of research they're doing, maybe it's some type of outreach they're doing, or having them point you in the direction of someone who can answer that question. And simple things like that, reestablish connections and keep your name and your face in people's minds. So, it doesn't have to really be social media when you want to keep in touch with people. The social media part is more like building your brand, building your kind of like your social media brand, your look, so where people are like, oh yeah, I've seen that face before. Oh yeah, because I have actually a classmate who had a huge social media following. People would approach me about her, like, hey, like, this classmate, like she's she's everywhere. And I'm like, yeah, she is, she's great. But, it's kind of, that's her brand though, and I think that's part of the reason why she was even successful. So it's more of your brand, I would say.
One last thing I'll add is when it comes to networking, try your best also, like if you can early on, to identify programs that you would be interested in. Or I know some classmates who really wanted to be back like on the West Coast. And so trying to get some sort of connection, whether that's like you go to someone who wrote a research paper from that institution and found their email, and then you want to talk about their research and that's like your plugin, or maybe someone else may know them, or you can contact the program director directly. And so I think when networking, also be strategic about it. But of course, get to know everyone, because you just don't know who can be that person to help you write a letter or whatever it is.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I'm sorry I can't put on my camera, but my internet keeps freezing.
I'm gonna ask the question in chat since it was here first, but is it kind of tying into the question we talked about earlier? Is it beneficial to try and ask for letters of recommendations from your away rotations?
Yeah, so I was just told, like I said, coming from a place without a home program, that that it can be if you do it early. So if you do an away rotation earlier, before September 1st, so you'd have to really do it probably like in July. That can be beneficial because I mean, where else are you going to get it from? Because you don't have an academic ophthalmologist. Luckily, a mentor was able to write it for me, but I know that's not the case for everyone. But yeah, so I mean, it can be. Yeah, I mean, sometimes that's your only option, you know.
Yeah, usually I've been told that getting some letters from aways help. But I think that, I think the best letter, like Pamela said from earlier, is like the people who know you the longest or like the people who you really click with. And I think that should be your priority in terms of getting letters. Obviously it needs to be an ophtho, but IM and surgery or gen surge, for example, are kind of like the two rotations that are kind of ophtho, like in terms of like looking at applications are focused on in terms of when you do well, you do the best in. So getting ones, people from those fields or an ophtho example, for example, will be best. But I think weight rotation letters can't hurt at all. But I wouldn't say to make those your number one choice. More of like, being strategic, like Pamela said as well. Like if that letter you get from that weight rotation could be good to use at either that institution or another one, then that will be good. But then if you're in a situation where you have no letters or you have limited letters, then of course get your weight rotation letter.
You to add on, it's all about, like, for me, I'm very strategic, so I'm trying always to be one step ahead. If you want it from an away rotation, I could imagine also identifying someone at that institution or a couple of people who you may connect with over something and just start building that relationship to the point that you then get to do your away rotation there. And for me, I had one or two people who served that purpose, and they were the ones who got me into those away rotations when I like applied late to them. So you can always be ahead of it and get those letters like going.
Marvelyn?
Well, thank you all so much, Donovan. That was a great presentation. And thank you all so much for just sharing all of this wisdom and knowledge. So my question pertains to, Donovan, you mentioned that when it comes to your application, that you don't need to be above average for everything, but how did you address maybe areas in your application that were less than ideal or were average in terms of, like, say research is not something that you're killing it at and you don't necessarily have as many publications, you have things in the works, but how did you address areas like that that were less than ideal?
Yeah, so it was pretty straightforward for me because the area of my application that I felt was the weakest, I was able to address in, like, not the personal statement, but like the other two questions. I think the question was like something about, again, resiliency. I think that's how I addressed it. And then in the interviews, I really didn't get asked about it all that much. I think maybe a couple of times. And when I just kind of rehashed what I had already typed out. And again, putting that positive spin on it, like, hey, this might have happened, but I, persevered through it, really honestly made a difference. But other than putting it in your application and like doing it that way, I mean, I think the biggest thing is just trying to strengthen other parts and trying to like magnify those parts. Like, okay, yeah, my research may not be all this, but I have this really amazing leadership opportunity that I've been killing it at, So trying to like steer them away from, the weaknesses and focusing on the strong. But when they bring up the weaknesses, be honest about it, talk about it. But then always, again, try to, and it's going to take you, practicing and, using your words and whatnot. to kind of put a spin on it to make it positive. But at the end of the day, just be genuine. And, because if they like you, they like you. If they don't, they don't. That's kind of my aspect. But yeah.
Thank you.
And Abby.
Hey Donovan, I think you mentioned your first opera rotation was in private practice. I was just wondering like how you went about securing that, and I guess like would you recommend trying to have like your first opera rotation be in private practice before you go to other OAs?
Yeah, so my school, that's actually a part of like the M4 courses. They give that option to students who are interested in ophthalmology. So, I maybe shadowed maybe a handful of times before that. So I knew, but I shadowed enough where I knew I wanted to do it. So I knew I needed that rotation to really, do that boot camp and really be prepared for my OAs. So honestly, do I recommend it? I mean, you get a lot more hands-on in academic settings. So if you have a home program, do it there. But if you don't, then private practice is all you have, really. So, and it's better to have it than nothing. But, there's some debate about, do you really need that before you do your ways, or can you just shadow here and there throughout third year and be ready for it? I think it just depends on the person. But for me, I knew having that month before 3 months of doing aways really was beneficial. And since I didn't have a home program, private practice was all I had.
Thanks.
Yeah, no problem.
And so I'll do Nicholas and Helia, and then after that, we'll let Sheba ask the questions.
Okay. First of all, just thank you everyone for being here. Really appreciate it. And thanks for the presentation, Donovan. It was super helpful. My question is, it pertains to research. Is there an area in like the SF Match application where you could put research that didn't necessarily lead to a publication, just saying that you had the experience in general?
Absolutely. There was a bunch of projects in there that I didn't get to finish that I wrote about them. And you can also, like, if publication is pending, you could also say that. So you can, in that area, you can talk about every little thing that you have done, whether you have a publication or not.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey everybody, I'm Helia. I'm an international medical graduate, and thanks for organizing this great meeting. I appreciate sharing your experiences. I have two questions, and my first is that what specific qualities or characteristics or programs sticking in letter of recommendations? And my second question is that because I'm a research fellow now, and then if I want to do an observership outside of my current institutions, I will have a limited time. So my question is that what is reasonable duration for an observership program to request for a letter of recommendation from that PI?
I can answer the first one. So I would say characteristics. Yeah, I think people really like when you're eager to learn. I know whenever I was at Wills, I would really try to go see patients in the ER, and that got around, and they liked that, and I was like, do students not go see patients? Like I had no idea. So yeah, just being eager to go see patients was a big deal apparently. And then like I said, just being personable, being able to have a conversation, that really takes you so far. Oh my goodness. Like just being, like I said, a normal person, and being kind, and being patient with people around you and everything. But I would definitely say the eager to learn is a big one. And then I don't know if anyone can answer the second question.
The second question was, you said did you say how long it would be, you should be doing in a way to get a good letter? Is that what you said?
Yes, that was my question.
Okay. Donovan, what was the average length of your aways? They're like what, 2 to 4 weeks?
Yeah, they were about 4 weeks. So I mean, so my dean, she said anyone should really be able to write you a letter of recommendation after 2 weeks. I don't know if everyone could agree with that, but I mean, if you work with, I will say, I worked with one ophthalmologist for 2 weeks straight. And I felt like by the end of those 2 weeks, she really knew me. Or not, I mean, subjective, but she really knew me as a student, and she could probably write something good about me. So, because I asked for feedback at the end of it, and I felt like her feedback was pretty good. Obviously, not 6 months of knowing you good, but again, you gotta take what you can get. So, I would say at least 2 weeks of working with someone consistently. But that was just my dean of student affairs opinion.
Thank you so much.
No
Thank you
problem.
all. Thank you all for all of the great questions. If you still have some, please continue to put them in the chat and maybe our panelists can answer them as we move on to the prepared question segment of the evening. So we've grouped the questions into categories, including application, away rotations. We talked about that a lot. So maybe we'll skip some of those questions. What students can do during their M1 to M3 years, and then a segment specific to DO students, and then research. Panelists, please answer in any order you guys feel comfortable. The first question is, what is the most important part of the application process?
Man, that's a tough one.
So I'm gonna let the other panelists do some talking as well.
Man, the most important part of the application process, gosh, are you talking, is that, I mean, I guess you don't know who asked it, but I guess is the person trying to break it down from like step 1, step 2, grades, research, I don't think there really is one biggest part, but I guess maybe you can break it down to what could keep you out. Maybe that's what we should focus on. I think the only thing I can really think of is like, say, step 1 and not getting through that for the first attempt. That could be a big barrier to getting through, but not to say anything's like, not possible or anything like that. But I'm just kind of spitballing right now because I think there's so many important parts to the application process. But the other panelists can also answer.
So maybe each element, maybe each element is important, and we shouldn't be prioritizing one part of the application over the other ones.
I agree.
I completely agree. I think each part matters. And so you want a balanced application and try to strengthen every area as much as possible. I think for me, what I guess were the biggest things at that time, because you already did your research, you already took your step 1, step 2, all that good stuff. So now the focus is your personal statement. And I think that sharing your story is one of the most important part, because it kind of puts together everything in your application of who you are. And I got a lot of questions about my personal statement and things in my personal statement. So I think working on that early on is incredibly important. And the second thing I will say, and I'll keep saying this again, is your strategy. Because going into it, I realized that this is somewhat a game, in that the more that you network, the more that you connect, the more that you tell people you're interested, like Donovan was saying before, the better it'll help you incredibly. So coming up with a strategy of what are the schools that I want to target, where do I want to interview, is incredibly important. Like for me, I really wanted to get out of New York, but my whole resume is New York. And so because of that, I had to do other things like away rotations and connect with people outside of New York to be able to get those interviews.
For me, I would say looking at the whole process, especially being a DO student, the away rotations were so important in the sense of even during an interview, you might only get 8 to 10 minutes with one of the attendings, and you can try to showcase your personality and your character, but it's tough in such a short amount of time. But when you're there for a couple of weeks, a month, you get a chance to really show yourself. And I don't think you should totally be this like reserved someone who you're not. Like, if you like making a joke, as long as it's appropriate, like do that. If you like playing sports, you're going to go work out on the weekend, kind of showcase that. It's one of the it's one of the times where you get to like show who you are. Obviously, you try to do that in an interview, but it's tough because you're nervous and it's short and it's pre-prepared questions. You're not really asking anything back for the most part. So in terms of dialogue, the away rotation is one of the few chances where you get to have like good dialogue with everybody involved.
Yeah, and that kind of also reminds me too. I mean, I guess this isn't really something that you send through SF Match, but when it comes to you getting when you get the interview and you're interviewing, you definitely should prepare as much as possible. Do practice interviews with your mentors, your family, your friends, and definitely get used to just answering those questions, those general questions that people might ask about, like, weaknesses or your strengths, or even the examples that Donovan put in his presentation today. So you can kind of be ready, and it doesn't come like forced, because you don't want to give a robotic answer, but you also want to give a natural answer. So it sounds like an actual dialogue. So definitely preparing for all your interviews and writing down good questions, because now there's all through Zoom. So, and you could have notes right next to you, while you're going through the interview. You could be like knocking things off, like checking things off your list. Like you could have the whole, control system set up. So, your advantage a little bit with that. Now, you don't have the personal connection that you can make. You can't shake hands and all those type of things, unfortunately. But there's some positives to the applicant when it comes to virtual interviews.
I want to add just one more thing, because I feel like this may be important. So I was told by the chair at Wills, she said that what separates people out of the pack is people with ophthalmology research and people who don't have it. Now that's one opinion. That's just one opinion. But to answer the question, in her eyes, that was the most important aspect of an application. Did you have ophthalmology research or not? But again, that's one opinion. There's so many other residencies. If you don't freak out. You'll still be fine. But that's just one aspect that she liked.
Oh, I also wanted to add one thing too. Dr. Carter, you're at Iowa, he had told me one time that when they're going through the applications, that they want, like Pam said, to have the personal statement catch their eye. They don't want to see like, oh, I had glasses since I was 4, and
say that.
Yeah, you don't want to have a personal statement that looks like that. It needs to be something that kind of weaves a story to, why you want to do ophthalmology, but also just kind of like gives the reader they want to, when you read this personal statement, you want them to feel like they want to speak to you. Like, I want to talk to this person because this person is like coming off the paper, and it'd be really interesting to talk to this person through the screen or have them at my institution. So really taking time to, vet that. And sometimes when you give your personal statement to somebody and they're like, no, redo it, don't take it personally, just kind of like reassess, have other people look at it as well. I've had my personal statement get like retooled completely, and then they said it looked better. I'm like, all right, cool. Now I feel a little bit better now because it was my PD looking at it, so because he reads personal statements. So yeah, I would definitely keep that in mind when it comes to typing your.
He did say that. I do remember that. He was, yeah, that's another good one. So you see two different institutions.
Pamela, you mentioned how many schools brought up your personal statement during your interview cycle. Did you guys receive any feedback from schools about things that stood out to them about your story or your application or your letters of recommendation during your journey? Or did they point out any mistakes or things you could have done better or improve upon?
Absolutely. I think like for the most part, a lot of the people who get these interviews, they already did it. They checked all the boxes in terms of like the step 1 and the research and all that stuff. So they're really curious about who you are as a person and your personality. I like to make clothes in my free time. And I'm very into fashion design and all that. So that was one of the first questions that I would get. Or I would get questions about my MBA. So anything that makes you different is what really stands out. And so be prepared to talk about those things. Like I had to pull up my Instagram to show someone like the dress I made because of how interested they were in it.
Yeah, in terms of things from my application, they might have mentioned, actually a few people mentioned what one of my letter writers wrote about me. and they appreciated what the writer had said, which I had no idea. I didn't see the letter, and I really appreciate how he wrote the story about me. So some people mentioned that. Other people mentioned, like, you know, my hobbies. Like, I wrote down I like to do Peloton and like for exercising. And I wrote down my account name so they could add me if they wanted to. So there's the one Susan asked me about that, and I was telling how much I like Peloton and stuff. And I try to like also weave it into being in residency, because I was telling them, like, you know, when you add your friends and you work out together, you're competing for a certain goal. And then for residency or in medicine, you're all working together to, like, for the health of the patient, or, you know, in a team, and you can complete tasks together that seem really hard when you're in a group of people. You know, when you run with a group of people, that becomes easier. You're already clearing a mile or two because you're surrounded by people. So, you know, you can connect your hobbies and things that you are interested in into characteristics that they might like at that certain program, for example. So yeah, those are a couple of things that they had mentioned.
Yeah, for me, so yeah, the restaurant industry, like I said, um, a lot of programs were just like, oh, you worked in the restaurant industry, that's really cool. Tell me about that. So if you have that, that's great. And then yeah, some of those odd jobs, like I was in landscaping. People like to hear about that too. That was another big thing. But again, like I said, intriguing life outside of medicine. I mean, that can really just, because people, you know, they ask the same questions, but when you have something a little different, they're like, oh, tell me about that, you know? So
Yeah, I would totally agree with that, in the sense that you should really just let your own kind of personality shine through. And also, in terms of the personal statement, which got brought up, it's tough because it is so short. You know, I think ours is even shorter than, you know, the rest of ERAS. But that's also a time because you have those additional questions to kind of be like, okay, here's an aspect of myself that maybe I wasn't able to touch upon in my personal statement, but I can build it into a question about resilience. And so kind of when you're coming up with your personal statement, and this is just the way I approached it, not thinking of it in isolation, but thinking of it in, okay, here's these other questions. So if I have a life experience that I want to discuss, maybe I can put it here because it doesn't fit as well. And kind of thinking about when you're putting, you know, your other questions together, assuming they still do that, which I assume they do, just kind of like, you know, what things do I want to touch in total, even if I can't squeeze them into that short personal statement.
Thank you. The next question is, was there anything during the application process that threw you off guard?
The interviews are so quick. It was just like you would get like 10 to 15 minutes and it was over. And then you were on to the next one. So it's like you get 15 minutes with one person, and sometimes you have to go through like 8 people in those 15 minutes, and you're trying to answer their questions, but also tie it back to who you are and your personality. I found it incredibly difficult to be able to do all of that in the 15 minutes. And you get better at it, but I felt like it was different from the medical school process, where I felt like I had more time to kind of just connect with that person.
Yeah, I agree. You know, sometimes like they'll even have it set up to where you'll do room one, and then when the timer runs out, it immediately just yanks you into the other room, and you can't even say bye. You can't even say thank you for your time, anything like that. And it's just like very jarring. So, you know, paying attention to the time counting down and say, hey, just want to, didn't mean to interrupt, but just want to thank you for your time, you know, for interviewing me, all those, you know, just being grateful for the opportunity before it might yank you out. Now, it might not do that, but it happened to me a couple of times. So I agree with the interviewing process being so short, which is pretty jarring sometimes.
always look at Matt. I'm like, does Matt want to talk or should I go? But no, I honestly agree with all of that. Like, yeah, there's nothing more to add. That was definitely the most surprising part.
I'll just add, make sure you know your research well, in the sense of, you may have done it before medical school started or first year, and then you get asked like, oh, tell me about that project. And it may not be the one that was most pertinent or time involving to you. It may just be the one that they chose on your app. So even if it isn't as, vital to your research story or whatever, like, make sure you look it over and you're like, oh yeah, that was what it was. It didn't happen often, but there was one, especially it might have been the first or second interview, where I really hadn't looked back at that project since I maybe looked at it once while I was creating the app to remind myself. But just, you just want to take all the things out of, someone else's control. So if you can control something, do it. And definitely reviewing your research, even if it was older, is definitely, everyone should be doing it.
Then we have some questions that are specific to DO applicants and students without home programs. So as a DO student, what can I do to be competitive? And also as a DO or as a student without a home program, what are things that we can do to distinguish ourselves in the application cycle?
All right, I'll take the lead here, because I don't know if there's any other DOs on the panel or not. A shout out to some of the DO students out there, because I know it's an uphill battle, as it is for the students that don't have a home program, and I didn't have a home program. One of the things I tell everyone is to take the steps. I think that may be a given by now, but any kind of objective measure that I can show, that I'm comparable with other people is always good. It's always good to be able to compare apples to apples in that regard. And then as a DO student, I thought one of the most important, like I've talked about, is the aways, in the sense of they really value that. Most of them are only 2 weeks, so you can get to more than those month-long ones. They didn't expect a lot going in. And I think that's probably the same for a lot of the other panelists up here in terms of technical skills. Like, if you can read about something beforehand, that's great, and read about it. But in terms of the hands-on skills, you might not have access to slit lamps, or you might not have access to lenses and whatnot. So don't worry about that. Go in there with a good attitude. That's really, I felt like, for the programs that I went to that were kind of the traditional DO ones, they really did want to see your personality. They were willing to teach. They understood you might not have had a home program, but have that grind, that hustle, just as much as anyone, if not more, because you are fighting an uphill battle. So any opportunity you can to, if you're in Michigan, there's a couple programs in Michigan they're all friendly. You can pop into a journal club. I drove down to the Ohio program, and the guys there were great. So it is a little bit more of kind of thinking outside of the box, a little bit more of hustling, but that's like part of the fun of it. It's not, it's intimidating at first, but you realize there's so many good people in this field and just in medicine who want to help. And so you just have to put yourself out there. When the first journal club I showed up to, when I was like the only student, I felt like awkward and shy, but by the end of it, everyone was so nice. Thanks for coming. I got a Chipotle meal out of it. I was happy. So just willing to kind of like put yourself out there a little bit and understand, like, I may be the anomaly, or kind of like, outside the box in that regard, but it goes a long way when people see you consistently putting that type of effort in.
Thank you, Matthew. And this question may be more relatable for students without home programs or DO applicants, but please, if any of the panelists have had research opportunities at institutions or with physicians outside of your institution, how did you go about securing those opportunities?
Yeah, I can speak on that. To be honest, the way I had secured a research opportunity was by getting a mentor at a different institution at first, because I was looking for research. This was during second year, and I just hopped on a diversity call for that program. And just like, how someone was just asking a minute ago, how to get in open houses for programs, sometimes like certain institutions will have like diversity program, for example, to where like they have a showcase for all of the different type of specialties. And then you say, okay, I want to join the ophthalmology one, for example. And then I just cold emailed the PD as an institution, and I was like, hey, I'm looking for research. You point me in the right direction. And then she was like, oh, I have a great mentor who, he now is an attending at that program. And then now I developed a relationship with him. And then just down the line, he eventually offered me like a research project that, we're still working on. But that only came through me cold emailing and just developing the natural relationship at first. And to be honest, I was kind of just helping without even expecting anything in return in the beginning. I was just, just someone who wanted to mentor me and I wanted to help him. And then eventually that happened. So sometimes like opportunities can be distilled from natural relationships that aren't really transactional.
I will add on that I do have a home institution, but I really wanted to do research in health disparities. And so I just went outside of my institution to do that. And if you have one or not, don't be afraid like to go somewhere else, because the more connections you build, the better. The way that I did it was actually through like a conference that I attended, that this lady was talking about health disparities within ophthalmology. I immediately emailed her the next day and we had a conversation and I was working with her on a project. So I think if you can find other institutions where there's projects you're interested in as well, even if you have a home institution, like definitely go for it. The more connections, the more research, the better.
And I didn't have a home institution, but one thing I will say in terms of kind of obtaining research opportunities, it's a numbers game. Like, don't think, okay, I need one research spot, I'm going to apply to one thing. Like, send out 20 emails to program or to, to PIs or whoever that you're interested in understanding that 10 might get glazed over, 5 of them might already have people in the position, and then 3 of them may be looking for year-long commitments as like full research years, but it is a numbers game. So it does take some time. Look up some projects. Like, for instance, I'm a student at Michigan State, but U of M is no more, I was at the Detroit campus, but it's no more than an hour away, and most kind of research, a lot of it is, can be done online. So you have like a major university there. So if you're in the Chicago area, there's a lot of, universities there. So even if it's not your home, reach out. It's going to take a lot of kind of like cold emails, conferences, whatever, but being persistent helps. And I don't mean like, attacking the same person over and over, but like kind of shooting out, 20 different emails, because you don't know which one of them is going to come to fruition, but it's worth taking that chance.
Yeah, and I'd also say, don't be afraid of like knowing multiple people at a certain institution too. Like, one person or like one person that at a certain program could be cool. But like, if like maybe 2 people there and their faculty, that's always a great thing. The more people the better. And the more people who think highly of you, or in that aspect, the better.
And with that, I'd like to extend a huge, huge, huge thank you to all of our newly matched ophthalmologists. Thank you, Donovan. Thank you, Pamela. Thank you, Matthew. Thank you, Alex, for your time and for your energy and for your wisdom tonight. Thank you to all of the attendees as well. Yeah, we learned a lot tonight. So thank you guys all for being so willing to share. Really quickly, we launched a survey project with Dr. Nathan Scott. He's an ophthalmologist on the West Coast. Tammy's going to share her screen. So if we can all please, even the matched panelists, take some time to use your phone to take a picture of the QR code. And if you could do it right now, that would be great. Or if you could save the link for later, and please help us by completing this survey, we would appreciate it. The session was recorded, and so as always, it will be uploaded to the YouTube page, and a link will follow once the session has been uploaded. Good night, everyone. So before you leave, please take out your phones and take a picture of the QR code.
Good luck to everybody. You guys are going to do great. I threw my contact, don't be bashful about reaching out or anything. I think I speak on behalf of the M4s here when I say this is like a pretty lax time for us. So it's really been nice to see everybody here, and I just want to wish everybody good luck.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to all the future ophthalmologists on this call. So I'll see you guys as colleagues one day. So I'm looking forward to that. Also put my contact in the chat. Please reach out for anything. Would love to talk.
Yes, be yourself. Try to enjoy life. Medical school is hard. Don't beat yourself up. Everyone fails. Have a growth mindset, and you'll do great.
I also put my email there. If anyone wants to get connected to like research mentors, I can also help with that. So feel free to reach out. But I think as you're going through the process, aside from being strategic, be your biggest cheerleader. It's a difficult process. And sometimes you're discouraged, but there are no constraints in your path. And the lack of constraints should start with you.
Those are beautiful parting words. So thank you each all so much. Thank you all so very, very much. If you guys have a few more minutes, if anyone wants to unmute and ask another question, feel free to, or write additional questions in the chat. Otherwise, maybe we'll close the Zoom link in about 5 minutes. And if anyone has to go too, please, no pressure to remain on. I think we're good on the questions. If you guys want to head out. Thank you guys so much. Have a good night. Bye.
Yeah, thanks so much for doing this.
See you later.
Guys later. Okay, I'm gonna stop recording.
Bye.
I'm trying to stop recording. I can't figure it out.
Is there not a record
stop
button at the top?
recording. Okay, I found it. I'm gonna stop it. Now I'm gonna have to go.
Edit.
Yeah.